All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. So here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest, Cornelia Elbrecht. Cornelia, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah,
you are welcome.
It's great to be back. Yeah.
So Cornelia studied at the School for Initiatic Therapy in the Black Forest, Germany, and holds degrees in fine arts and arts education, along with extensive postgrad training in Jungian and Gestalt Therapy, Bioenergetics, and at the Somatic Experiencing Training Institute. She's best known for her cutting-edge work with guided drawing and clay field therapy. She holds regular workshops around the world and at Claerwen Retreat in Apollo Bay, Australia, an internationally respected arts therapy education facility. Today, we're going to be talking about touch in its relation to trauma. But before we get there, Cornelia, welcome. Super excited to have you back here. I remember talking to you. Remembered your effervescent smile and your presence. I was like, I seriously want to have this person back. But before we get into everything here, please share with the listeners, for those who didn't hear the first episode 594 of the podcast, where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I'm originally from Germany, so that's where I did my core training. And then midlife, I immigrated to Australia, and this is where I'm living now.
Okay. I probably asked you this before, but why did you move to Australia?
It's the immigration story. Yeah,
is that another episode?
I don't think anybody immigrates without a big push, if not to say trauma. So I believe I've always been looking to leave Germany. I went 3 times with a one-way ticket to the US, and came back ultimately saying, no, it's not working for me. And when I came to Australia, it was like, yes, that's
really
the country. Yes.
What about it?
It was just something that resonated in the how can I say it? It's a feminine archetype, that what someone once said, whereas the US is a more masculine archetype. It's more hero based, and whereas Australia is very much secular, as in supporting each other and helping each other. Australians don't like it if you are too much of a tall poppy, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's,
Wow.
I don't know. It had something very European, Australia, that as well as this amazing nature, which but the US has the amazing nature as well. But I can't. It wasn't a rational decision, and then to meet a man, it certainly helped to make this less rational. I married an Australian man, and that, but the move was definitely driven by lots of events in Germany that just really made me I had to leave. Yeah.
Wow. Appreciate you sharing that. All right. So let's dive in here. Before we started on here, I asked you, what you wanted to talk about, and you said touch.
Yep.
Let's dive into it. Why, what, and why?
So I believe touch is the most under-researched of all the senses we have. Right? We have sight, smell, taste, and touch is so early because it starts in utero. That is our first experience. And I think we just take it so much for granted that we don't think much about touch trauma. And at the same time, when I started to work initially with finger paints and then with the clay, I noticed how many people were there who just couldn't touch it, or they'd go with one finger, or they'd have, this is my red finger, this is my blue finger, this is my yellow finger, rather than, even though you give them a big tub of paint, or there's 10 kilos of clay in front of them, and they will not touch it. And then I became aware of my own touch trauma as a baby, as in that I was raised with a paradigm that if you touch and hold and cuddle your baby too much, you'll spoil it and they'll go wrong. So it was very structured. I was breastfed every 4 hours and then was put in a crib in a room with a closed door so no one could hear me cry. So I have memories from, even as an infant, from looking at myself from the ceiling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was so dissociated.
So if I may, just to be clear here, we're not talking about touch as a healing modality. You're talking about touch trauma.
Exactly. Yeah.
What does that mean, touch trauma?
Touch trauma is that, for example, when you touch, say, for example, my clients that I observed, they touch paint, or not with the paintbrush, with the hands or the clay, that they shy away. Like they fear because there's a learned behavior that if I touch, there will be pain. If I touch, I will get hurt. That could, for example, apply to any domestic violence. It could be sexual abuse. It could be medical issues when you've gone through a lot of surgeries where, your skin boundary was invaded. And these are touch experiences. Like you can't look into a crib with a baby and say to the baby, I love you, you are safe. The baby, that will mean nothing to the baby. Mm-hmm. Like safety and love is communicated through holding, and caressing the baby and how you hold the baby. So we learn attachment and communication through touch. And when we haven't experienced that, to downregulate, for example, or we've been too hurt to touch, it creates a withdrawal on the inside that basically part of the communication feedback loop is cut off. So what I do is called sensory motor art therapy. So you have the two pathways of sensing and motor impulses. And people with touch trauma, for example, can be people who are very busy. They're always action, 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 but they don't stop to feel anything. They never get anything back of what they're doing. I hope I'm making sense here.
Man, you are. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, I can feel it. I mean, I seriously, it conversely, I'm just thinking how healing touch is just when someone touches you, and also how what's the word here, sketchy or within the therapeutic community, within therapy, touch is has certain connotations. It's tricky waters to wade in.
Absolutely, yeah. Like
Right.
you can't hug and caress your clients, yeah.
Right.
Like that's So you to have the clay, for example, as a mediator. In somatic experiencing, we used cushions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for example, that you have a cushion here, and you can, invite your client to lean, into it. So you're not having the hugging experience, but you still have the connection experience. But I also think we've just gone through 3 years of touch phobia with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think the World Health Organization released statistics that mental health and anxiety have increased by 25% worldwide. It's because of COVID, because we didn't have that option to down-regulate and co-regulate through touch.
So people who, this is interesting because I don't know if I've had this discussion before on this podcast. I mean, of course, we've talked about somatic trauma and attachment trauma, but to kind of break it down into the aspect of touch, how does it, granted, people are different, but give us an example or a couple of examples of how does this show up to you? When you see something, or what do you see, and then you start thinking, okay, touch.
For example, I worked with a client yesterday, and it was in guided drawing, and she went straight away into moving. And at the same time, she was telling me how blocked she felt. And so I asked her to slow down her rhythm, because it was obvious that she had a lot of motor impulses, but she was not feeling anything. And even with slowing down, I could feel it was not resonating with her. And then her hand actually stopped at one point, and she looked very confused. And I kept asking her just to stay with this and just sense what was happening inside her. And then she started to cry. And she almost needed this more point of fully stopping in order to actually, and then her hands who had been like this before, like she was touching the paper here, but had her hands literally braced away like this. So, and then her hand went like this. And you could feel her shoulders going down. She connected with the base of the hand. And for example, if you push your desk with your fingertips, like what will happen is your shoulders will go up. Because you have no agency. The moment you push with the base of your hand, your pelvis engages. So from body work, I know, and it's in acupuncture and acupressure, that this part of the hand here, relate to the pelvis. This is the heart space, and the fingers are the cortex and all the fine tuning and fine motor skills. And when you, for example, do something really fiddly, like you add the ears of a cat, with your fingertips, you actually begin to see the cat and you see the environment, that it brings in all this imagery, whereas engaging the base of the hand and the thumbs engages the body. So when I work with clients, I watch their hands and what they're doing.
Wow. So naturally, or not naturally, but maybe someone who doesn't want to or push like that is unconsciously inhibited.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's a form of dissociation, which we just do in order to keep safe. It's learned behavior, because when I went there, it was too painful, did get hurt, or whatever happened.
All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back. So you talked about before someone who was just like touching the clay or the paint, just like this.
Yeah.
What does that say to you? What are the options there?
She's very engaged in your head. It's very cognitive and avoiding her body, and at the same time, and avoiding embodiment. Yes, so psychologically, you'd say dissociated, and at the same time, she had a lot of physiological complaints about feeling blocked and and pain and tension in her body. And as she went down with her hand and took time, and she literally ended up sitting 20 minutes just playing with the base of her hand, connecting with the paper and the paint. All the tension in her body resolved, including tears and the tension in her legs and the tension in her gut, all settled.
Now, this could originate from what type of trauma? The lack.
I don't know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not.
And I don't inquire. Yeah. And, for example, I work with a lot of children, and you see it all the time. Yeah. Like the ADHD pattern, on the autism spectrum, they all can't, they have no agency in their hands. Yeah. And the kids will not tell you why. What happened to them when they were 2 years old or when they were babies. But you can work with them in order to create like a safe environment for them in the art space where they can learn to touch and settle and experience themselves in their body. And I call it post-nurture, their developmental deficit.
So there's an inability or a fear, and maybe it's, I don't know why, but I just can't push with my palms. Yeah.
That's, for example, the ADHD pattern. Is that this in somatic experiencing, they say these children had a traumatic event between 2 and 4 when the motor cortex really develops, when we learn, for example, to run and to have play fights with dad and to acquire the self-esteem through doing things.
Right.
And it's simply about honing your muscles, your ligaments, to organizing your skeletal build in order to have an effect onto something. And these kids, for example, when they're in primary school, they have huge amount of energy and all these dysregulated emotions, but they can't organize their body. To do anything, to have an outlet for it. And the majority of the therapy is simply with push exercises, downward pressure, and lifting, like you see these little boys and lifting, like the whole box with 10 kilos of clay standing there and just beaming. And that ability comes online, and then sometimes within 6 months, they learn to read and write, and all their behavioral difficulties definitely reduce. So I think you could do the same through martial arts or just exercises that hone the body in order to teach them to coordinate. But initially they are like they're collapsed, their hand like that. Like they are rage in their body, and then they can't bring anything out. It's extraordinary to watch. And the pain that happens when you teach them or they learn, how to engage their hands and simply push, and pull and lift.
Right. Now, oftentimes when people talk about trauma, there's the impact on the soma, on the body. But here we're talking specifically about the hands and the arms and pushing. Is this necessarily correlated? Or
absolutely.
But to like a specific type of trauma or traumas? Or is it just, it doesn't matter? It could be any type of trauma.
Yes. Yeah. I just look at it that trauma impacts either on the motor cortex. For example, I know it from children in households with domestic violence. Especially girls decide it's the safest is to fly under the radar.
Right.
So not to be noticed, not to be too loud, to be quiet and reduced. So they don't move. They are in sensory overload, perceiving a pin drop 2 rooms down the track. When you have them in the clinic, they'll ask about every noise that's happened in the building. But their movements are inhibited. And then you have the others who are go, lots and lots of movement, but they have dissociated the feedback loop.
Wow.
Like if you think of the domestic violence setting, for example, the boys might identify with the father, and to feel means to be like the mother and to get hurt. So they just dissociate that part, and they, go. But like you give them, warm water, and initially they won't feel the warmth because they just shut down that part where anything comes back from contact.
And it's a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like the most creative solution you could come up at the time. Yeah.
Right. Wow. That image of not wanting to push or feeling like but not knowing why. Right. I don't want to push like this, or I can't push like that. You're saying how, because that pushing, and I can even feel it just doing this, how it engages the core, the pelvis.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I guess what I found out over decades really is that when your pelvis is still your pelvis, you might have experienced sexual abuse, but your pelvis is still your pelvis. So if you find exercises that simply engage your pelvis, you can, in somatic experiencing, it's called uncouple the trauma from the body. Yes. So because the implicit behavior is I just avoid going to anywhere near that in my body. So to actually teach them, okay, you can push and engage your pelvis, and it's still your pelvis. So you're not all that trauma.
Right.
And that can be a pathway to gradually becoming more embodied.
Wow. That's fascinating.
I find it totally fascinating.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I'm just thinking to myself that, again, a lot of this is unconscious. People who have experienced trauma that you don't, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of people don't even know that they've experienced trauma. But to even drill down to this level where you're thinking about how some people could be inhibited to not just to embrace, but just to push.
Yeah. And because you've done that since you were 1 year old or 2 year old,
Right.
you don't know any different.
Right.
So this is what you identify as me. Yeah, like this is my identity. This is who I am.
Wow. So for those therapists who are listening to this, share a little bit about your process of maybe assessing in these terms when someone walks into your office. What are you maybe looking for if we're talking specifically about this touch trauma?
So, I mean, I was fortunate that my training was never about the symptoms, about diagnosis. Like I've had a lot of trouble with going for supervision in Australia and saying, I've got this and this client. And then, my supervisor would say, well, that's a personality disorder. And I'd say, yeah, I know that, but how do I work with this person? And he'd just say, well, it's a personality disorder. Yeah, like it was almost like, we've put that stamp on that person.
Yeah.
Is I just watch, like how is someone coming into the room? Yeah, like how do they organize their body? Yeah, like how much, if you take in the polyvagal theory, like how capable is this client of social engagement? Can she make eye contact? Say hello, or is it just all looking away, looking down, and then are they internally dead, or are they hyper activated, and doing too much? Like the client I described from yesterday, she was doing too much. She was go, but she couldn't feel anything. Others are like they can't move, like they sit like this. I see so many kids who sit like this in front of paint and paper and like contracted in their body and just not daring to touch. And then it's about like how can I create safety? What exercises will make this individual feel safe enough so they can dare to explore the options that are there. And sometimes that takes time. But I observe hands and body posture more than what they're talking about.
Wow. That image of, you just said, kids just sitting there, not able to touch the paint or whatever. What is going on in your mind when you see something like that?
Oh, certainly saying, gosh, what has happened to you? That made you learn this. And consider this as a normal, in engaging in contact. Like this one was a 3-year-old girl. And then it was like mirroring, like with a fingertip, just one finger could touch the clay. And she watched me doing it, and then nothing happened. And very often it is this, that nothing happens. I can touch this and doesn't explode, it doesn't yell, it doesn't flash out, nothing happens. And then she would go and do one finger, and then I'd go one finger, and then she'd go one finger. And gradually you build that trust, that it could be possible here in this setting to touch without getting hurt.
I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Cornelia Elbrecht. Wow, fascinating to me. Now, granted, I have to preface all my questions with everyone is different and everything is different, but highlighting this particular instance you're talking about, when might it be necessary to weave in this kid's story, or what happened with them? Would that ever come into play?
With adults, certainly. Yeah, but I find, and I was trained like that back in Germany originally, and then somatic experiencing almost gave me the language to explain it, because back in the 70s and 80s, no one had that trauma language that Peter Levine developed, that you don't start at the beginning with what happened, because you just go deeper and deeper into the trauma. Like if you talk to an adult and they have, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and it gets worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
So you start first in building resources. So there is a good place you can go to, and then you titrate going to the bad place. And if it gets too much there, you go back to the good place.
Mm-hmm.
And settle the nervous system, and then you go a bit back to the bad place, and then again to the good place to settle the nervous system. And Peter Levine has emphasized really that the solution for trauma is never in the story. Because if there was trauma, we dissociated. Parts were dissociated. So our memory is fractured anyhow. He calls it the medusa, or the terror of remembering.
Mm-hmm.
That we do so much therapy in trying to remember what happened to us, rather than putting the focus on the repair.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think, like I've broken my arm when I go to the doctor, and then the doctor will say, how about, just to make sure we understand how you broke your arm, you will break it again.
Right. Let me feel that arm there. Right.
Rather, what you want is a plaster cast, and a bandage, and support that it can heal.
Yeah. Wow. Cornelia, man, love talking to you. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Probably I have now developed a course on clay field therapy with traumatized children, which is an online course. So that is something, it's all on my website, sensorimotorarttherapy.com.
Wow.
There's lots of information there.
Okay. Now, clay field therapy, what does that mean, clay field therapy?
So it is clay in a box. So it's not just a lump of clay. It is like a box about this size, but this deep, filled with clay.
Wow.
So young children will get about 5 kilos of clay, adults up to 12 kilos of clay, and it's flat. So it's not so much the impulse of what do I make here if you put a lump of clay in front of someone, but how do I relate to this?
Mm.
So you offer a relationship with yourself. And as you touch the clay, what comes back is yourself, how you learn touch. And then you can step by step repair it, so it becomes more fulfilling, for example, to touch.
Wow. I'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Cornelia, I love talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me again.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.